Silence fell heavily over the federal courthouse gallery as Chief Harlan Voss watched the plaintiff approach the witness stand. His chest swelled with years of unchecked authority, and a smug smirk played across his lips. He believed he was about to dismiss yet another nuisance complaint from the woman he had humiliated on a rainy highway weeks earlier. He failed to notice the faint tremor in his expensive attorney's hands. He did not realize the black woman adjusting the microphone was no helpless civilian. He had no idea he was staring at the newly appointed federal oversight director of the Department of Justice, the woman who now held his badge, his career, and his freedom in her hands. The town of Crestwood clung to an older era, where the local police department functioned less like a public service and more like a private militia. At the top of that chain stood Police Chief Harlan Voss, a broad-shouldered man with a ruddy complexion and a silver mustache. He had spent years treating the town limits as the borders of his own private kingdom. He was the law, the judge, and often the executioner of reputations. On a stormy night, the trap was set without anyone realizing it. Officer Nolan Reed, a rookie hungry for the chief's approval, pulled over a dark gray sedan on Route 9, just beyond the glowing neon sign of the local diner. The official reason would later be logged as a swerving motion and a suspiciously obscured license plate. The dashcam, however, would show the sedan driving with perfect, agonizing compliance. Chief Harlan Voss, fresh from coffee and pie at the diner, spotted the flashing lights and strolled out into the misty rain to demonstrate how a real officer handled things. Inside the sedan sat Director Aaliyah Brooks. She wore a simple gray hoodie and sweatpants after an exhausting long drive from Washington, D.C., and had deliberately chosen a rental car that would not attract attention. When Officer Nolan Reed approached her window, nervous yet trying to sound authoritative, she calmly handed over her driver's license and rental agreement. Then, Harlan Voss stepped in. He waved the rookie aside, leaned his heavy frame against her door, water dripping from his raincoat visor, and shone his mag light straight into her eyes. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice loud enough to carry over the rain to the patrons watching from the diner windows. "What do we have here? You're a long way from home, aren't you, girl?" "I am traveling for work, officer," Aaliyah replied. Her voice was steady and measured, completely free of the fear he was used to drawing from outsiders. Harlan disliked her tone. He disliked her calm. To him, calm was defiance. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked. "For a traffic stop?" she asked, her hand still perfectly visible on the steering wheel. "Am I under arrest, or is there reasonable suspicion of a crime?" The legal language rolling so easily from her lips struck a nerve. Harlan yanked her door open. "In Crestwood, you step out when I tell you to step out. I'm Chief Harlan Voss, and I don't need backtalk from someone driving a cheap rental through my town late at night. Out. Now." Knowing the legal boundaries and the physical danger far better than anyone present, Aaliyah complied. She stepped into the freezing mud of the shoulder. Rain immediately soaked through her thin hoodie. Harlan put on a show. For a prolonged period, he kept her standing in the downpour while he and Officer Nolan Reed conducted an illegal search of her vehicle. He tossed her luggage onto the wet pavement and kicked a pair of her dress shoes into a puddle. He mocked her loudly, questioning whether she could read speed limit signs, how she could afford the rental, and making thinly veiled remarks about city people bringing trouble into his town. Through it all, Aaliyah said nothing. She did not scream. She did not cry. She stood in the freezing rain, her dark eyes fixed on Harlan, memorizing every badge number, every procedural violation, every insult. "You think you're smart?" he sneered, flinging her DC driver's license at her chest. It fluttered into the mud at her feet. "You think because you stay quiet I don't see exactly what you are? You're a nobody. If I ever see you driving through my town again, I won't be this polite. Pick up your trash and get out of my sight." Aaliyah slowly bent, retrieved her license, and wiped the mud from it. She met Harlan's gaze with a chillingly calm expression. "Have a good night, Chief Harlan Voss. I'm sure we'll see each other again." He laughed, a booming, arrogant sound. He believed he had broken another outsider. He had no idea he had just handed a loaded weapon to the very person who would dismantle everything he had built. Weeks later, the atmosphere inside the federal district courthouse felt suffocating. This was no local traffic court. This was a towering monument of marble and oak where local tyrants were regularly stripped of power. Yet Chief Harlan Voss sat at the defense table as though he were at a casual ballgame. He leaned back in his leather chair, whispering a joke to his attorney, Quentin Hale. Quentin was a shark in a tailored suit, famous for getting dirty cops off the hook through aggressive cross-examinations and technical loopholes. Harlan had been summoned for a preliminary evidentiary hearing on a civil rights complaint he assumed had been filed by the woman from the Rainy Highway. He had brought 2 loyal sergeants to sit in the gallery, ready to intimidate the plaintiff the moment she appeared. "Don't worry about it, Harlan," Quentin muttered, shuffling papers. "These pro-se civil rights cases fall apart fast. She's claiming emotional distress and unlawful search. We'll cite qualified immunity, say she matched a fugitive description, and the judge will toss it before long. I just want to see the look on her face when she realizes she came all this way only to be thrown out." Harlan chuckled and adjusted his tie. At the appointed hour, the bailiff announced the arrival of the Honorable Judge Everett Caldwell. The courtroom rose. Judge Caldwell was a stern, no-nonsense jurist with a well-known distaste for police corruption. He took his seat, adjusted his spectacles, and glanced at the docket. "We are here for the matter of Brooks versus the Crestwood Police Department et al." Judge Caldwell's voice echoed. "Is the plaintiff present?" The heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Every whisper in the gallery died. Aaliyah Brooks walked down the center aisle. She no longer wore the gray hoodie. She was not trembling. She wore an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit, her hair styled in sharp, commanding micro-locks. She carried a leather briefcase bearing an embossed gold seal that caught the light. Her heels struck the hardwood floor with the steady rhythm of a metronome. Harlan blinked. His smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He almost did not recognize her. The woman who had stood in the mud weeks earlier had looked vulnerable. The woman now walking past him radiated a terrifying, clinical authority. She did not spare him a glance. She walked straight to the plaintiff's table, but did not sit. Instead, she stood behind the podium, flanked by Elias Grant, a senior prosecutor from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Quentin stopped shuffling papers. He recognized Elias Grant. Every defense attorney in the state knew that name. Elias did not handle minor pro-se complaints. He handled sweeping federal indictments. "Your Honor," Elias began, his voice smooth yet carrying devastating weight. "The United States government is ready to proceed." Harlan leaned toward his attorney, brow furrowing. "The government? What the hell is he talking about? I thought this was a civil suit from this woman." "Shut up, Harlan!" Quentin hissed, his face draining of color. He scrambled to read the first page of the amended complaint that had been filed under seal only recently. His eyes widened as he scanned the heavily redacted text. Judge Caldwell looked down from the bench, his gaze moving from Harlan to Aaliyah. "Ms. Brooks, the court recognizes you. Are we ready to begin the evidentiary phase regarding the events on the highway and the subsequent motion for federal receivership?" "We are, Your Honor," she replied. Her voice was exactly as it had been on the highway, steady, measured, completely calm. Here, however, that calm was no longer a shield. It was an executioner's blade. Harlan's heart gave a strange, unfamiliar thud. Federal receivership? He stared at the woman he had left shivering in the mud and felt the ground beneath his feet begin to shift. "The prosecution calls Director Aaliyah Brooks to the stand," Elias announced. Aaliyah stepped into the witness box, took the oath, and sat, smoothing her jacket. She looked directly at Harlan. For the first time, a cold sweat prickled the back of his neck. Elias approached the podium. "Director Brooks, could you please state for the record where you were on the night of the traffic stop?" "I was driving on Route 9, entering the municipal boundaries of Crestwood," she answered clearly. Elias nodded. "And what happened at that time?" "I was subjected to a traffic stop by Officer Nolan Reed, who was subsequently joined by Chief Harlan Voss." "Objection!" Quentin shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is a standard traffic stop. Any dispute over a citation belongs in traffic court, not a federal hearing." "Overruled," Judge Caldwell snapped. "Mr. Hale, I strongly suggest you read the amended filing before you interrupt again. Proceed, Mr. Grant." Elias turned to the AV cart and clicked a remote. The massive screen flickered to life, displaying the dashcam footage from Officer Nolan Reed's cruiser. The courtroom watched in silence as the grainy images played. They saw the rain. They saw Harlan shove the rookie aside. Then the audio, enhanced by federal forensics, filled the room. Harlan's booming voice echoed, "You're a nobody. If I ever see you driving through my town again, I won't be this polite. Pick up your trash and get out of my sight." Elias stopped the video. "Director Brooks, were you ever issued a citation for a traffic violation that night?" "No, sir. I was detained for a prolonged period. My vehicle was illegally searched without probable cause or a warrant. My personal belongings were damaged, and I was verbally threatened by Chief Harlan Voss. Then I was told to leave." Elias let the silence hang. "Director Brooks, Chief Harlan Voss called you a nobody. He asked what you were doing in his town. Could you please enlighten the court and Chief Harlan Voss as to exactly why you were traveling to Crestwood that night?" Harlan gripped the edge of the defense table. Quentin dropped his head into his hands. Aaliyah leaned forward, her eyes locked on Harlan like a predator closing in. "I was traveling to Crestwood to begin my new assignment," she said, her voice carrying perfectly through the silent room. Days prior to that traffic stop, the United States Department of Justice concluded a lengthy covert investigation into the Crestwood Police Department regarding systemic civil rights violations, illegal searches and seizures, and misappropriation of municipal funds. Harlan stopped breathing. "As a result of those findings," she continued, relentless and cold, "a federal consent decree was authorized by the Attorney General. I was transferred from Washington, D.C. to serve as Federal Oversight Director and Special Inspector General for the Crestwood Police Department." A collective gasp swept the gallery. Reporters in the back row began typing furiously. "And what does that role entail, Director Brooks?" Elias asked, a grim smile touching his lips. "It entails complete operational and administrative control over the department," she stated, never breaking eye contact with Harlan. "Every badge, every gun, every dollar, and every personnel decision must pass through my office until the Department of Justice certifies that the department is no longer operating as a criminal enterprise. I am the ultimate authority." Elias turned toward Harlan. "So, Director Brooks, when Chief Harlan Voss told you to get out of his town, he was fundamentally mistaken," she said smoothly. "Because as of the signing of the federal decree, the Crestwood Police Department answers entirely to me. I am, for all intents and purposes, Chief Harlan Voss's direct commanding officer." Harlan felt the air leave his lungs. He had stood a federal inspector general in freezing mud. He had kicked her shoes. He had threatened her. He had handed the Department of Justice high-definition evidence of the very corruption they had come to eradicate, and he had done it to the person now in charge. Quentin rose, voice cracking. "Your Honor, Defense requests a brief recess. Denied, Judge Caldwell said, disgust thick in his voice. Director Brooks is not finished, and I am very interested in hearing the rest of her operational assessment. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the frantic scratching of reporters' pens. Chief Harlan Voss sat frozen, knuckles white on the edge of the defense table. Quentin Hale, sensing his client sinking fast, tried to throw a lifeline. He stood and buttoned his jacket with forced confidence. Director Brooks, he began, sarcasm edging his tone. While your appointment is notable, the fact remains that on the night of the traffic stop, you were driving an unmarked vehicle, wearing casual clothing, and did not identify yourself as a federal agent. My client treated you exactly as he would any citizen acting suspiciously late at night. Are you claiming that because you are a federal official, you are exempt from routine traffic stops? Aaliyah adjusted the microphone, her dark eyes fixed on him. Mr. Hale, under federal law, the deprivation of rights under color of law does not require the victim to be a federal agent. The violation occurs when a law enforcement officer willfully deprives any person of a right or privilege protected by the Constitution. I did not identify myself because I was conducting a baseline operational assessment. I wanted to see exactly how Chief Harlan Voss treats any other citizen. Now we have the answer on high-definition video. Quentin swallowed hard. An assessment? You expect this court to believe you stood in freezing rain for an extended period simply to conduct an assessment? I expect the court to believe the documentary evidence, she replied. She nodded to Elias, who handed a thick binder to the bailiff for Judge Caldwell. Another copy landed on the defense table in front of Harlan. Your Honor, Elias said, Exhibit C is the preliminary audit conducted by Director Brooks in the time since the incident, while Chief Harlan Voss believed she was merely a disgruntled motorist. As acting head of the department, she had unfettered legal access to every server, lockbox, and financial ledger in the precinct. Harlan's face drained to a sickly gray. He stared at the binder as though it might explode. Let's turn to the relevant section, Aaliyah instructed, voice precise. During the illegal search of my vehicle that night, Chief Harlan Voss repeatedly asked how much cash I was carrying. When I said I had none, he grew visibly agitated. In the time since, I reviewed the department's civil asset forfeiture logs. Over recent years, the Crestwood Police Department seized over $4.2 million in cash from out-of-state drivers under the guise of suspected narcotics trafficking. In 87% of those stops, the drivers were minorities. In 94% of those stops, no drugs were found, no arrests were made, and no criminal charges were ever filed. Yet the money was kept. Judge Caldwell's jaw tightened as he flipped pages. Director Brooks, where did this money go? Does Crestwood have a multi-million-dollar surplus I am unaware of? No, Your Honor, she answered. The funds were routed into an unmonitored discretionary account controlled exclusively by Chief Harlan Voss. That account purchased militarized tactical gear the town does not need, a fleet of luxury SUVs for command staff, and covered massive overtime payouts for his inner circle. An inner circle that includes the two sergeants sitting in the gallery. Every head in the courtroom turned toward the two sergeants. They shrank in their seats like men who had just realized the building was on fire. Objection! Quentin shouted. This is a civil rights hearing about a single traffic stop, not a financial tribunal. Sit down, Mr. Hale, Judge Caldwell growled. Your client is the subject of a federal receivership overseen by the witness. This court will hear every word she has to say. Aaliyah looked back at Harlan. The smug arrogance was gone, replaced by the wide-eyed terror of a man watching his private empire annexed by the federal government. I did not identify myself that night, she concluded quietly, because if I had flashed a federal badge, Chief Harlan Voss would have hidden his true nature. By remaining silent, I allowed him to provide the probable cause I needed to audit his department to the floorboards. If the financial audit was the bullet that wounded him, the next witness delivered the kill shot. Elias Grant straightened his tie. The government calls Officer Nolan Reed to the stand. Harlan's head whipped toward the rear doors. Officer Nolan Reed entered wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit and looking as though he had not slept in days. He avoided Harlan's murderous stare as he took the oath. "Officer Reed," Elias began gently, "you were present during the traffic stop of Director Brooks's vehicle, correct?" "Yes, sir," Nolan mumbled. "Why did you pull that specific vehicle over?" Nolan stared at his hands. I was instructed to." "By whom?" "By Chief Harlan Voss, sir. We have a standing order, off the books. Operation Border Patrol, the chief calls it. Any out-of-state plates, especially rentals, especially driven by minorities traveling alone, we pull them over. We look for cash." The gallery erupted in whispers. Judge Caldwell's gavel cracked. "Order. Officer Reed, you are admitting under oath to systematic, racially motivated policing directed by the Chief of Police." "Yes, Your Honor," Nolan said, voice shaking yet steady. "If we didn't comply, we were put on undesirable shifts or written up for phantom infractions. The chief controls everything. Or he used to." Elias stepped closer. "Officer Reed, did you speak with Director Brooks after that night?" "Yes, sir. Recently. She called me into her office and told me she had the dash cam audio. She said that while I initiated the stop, I did not participate in the verbal abuse or the illegal search. She said I had a choice: go down with the ship or remember the oath I took to the Constitution and help the Department of Justice remove the rot from the precinct." Harlan could no longer contain himself. His face purple with rage, he slammed both fists on the defense table and surged to his feet. "You little rat! I made you! I gave you that badge! You're nothing without me, you sniveling little—" "Bailiff!" Judge Caldwell roared. "Restrain the defendant!" Two federal marshals descended, forcing Harlan back into his chair. "Chief Harlan Voss," Judge Caldwell said, voice dangerously low. "One more outburst, and I will hold you in criminal contempt and remand you to jail for the duration of these proceedings. Do you understand me?" Harlan sat heavily, chest heaving, the last shreds of his invincibility gone. He looked at Quentin for rescue, but his attorney was already calculating how quickly he could distance his firm from the coming disaster. Elias turned back to the witness. "Officer Reed, has Chief Harlan Voss ever explicitly told you to target individuals he believed lacked the resources to fight back in court?" "Yes, sir," Nolan said quietly. "He called them nobodies. He said nobodies don't hire lawyers." Elias nodded, letting the phrase linger. "No further questions, Your Honor." As Nolan Reed stepped down, the courtroom felt the full weight of what had just occurred. The federal trap had not merely caught a corrupt cop. It had dismantled his entire power structure, using his own officers and his own arrogance as the instruments of his destruction. At the defense table, Harlan Voss looked like a man who had forgotten how to breathe. His broad shoulders had caved inward. The confident flush was gone, replaced by a sickly pallor. He looked, for the first time in his adult life, profoundly small. Quentin Hale hunched over his phone, thumbs striking the screen in panicked jabs, already swimming away from the sinking ship. Elias Grant remained standing at the podium, the picture of terrifying patience, until the gallery fell into hushed anticipation. "Your Honor," he said, voice cutting through the heavy air, "the government calls Chief Harlan Voss to the stand." The words hit like a physical blow. Quentin shot up so fast his chair nearly toppled. "Objection! My client has a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. He cannot be compelled to testify in what has clearly become a criminal inquiry." Judge Caldwell leaned forward, eyes like flint. "Mr. Hale, you misunderstand the nature of this proceeding. This is an emergency federal receivership hearing regarding your client's administrative capacity under a Department of Justice consent decree. It is not yet a criminal trial. Chief Harlan Voss may plead the Fifth to specific questions about overt criminal conduct, but he will take the stand to answer for his administrative actions and departmental policies. The alternative is that I issue summary judgment right now, stripping him of his badge, pension, and command effective this second. Harlan grabbed Quentin's wrist, voice a frantic hiss. "Quentin, you can't let him do this. I can't lose my pension, my years of service. I'll go up there. I know how to talk to these people." Quentin yanked his arm free, disgust plain on his face. "You are completely delusional, Harlan." He turned to the judge, posture stiff. "The defense yields, Your Honor." Harlan stood. His knees popped in the silence. He lumbered to the witness box, raised his hand, swore the oath, and collapsed into the chair. He stared at Elias Grant, refusing to look at Aaliyah Brooks sitting with lethal stillness to his left. Elias approached slowly, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. He opened a thick blue folder. "Chief Harlan Voss, let's talk about the administrative structure of your department. Let's talk about the Crestwood Fraternity Fund. Does that name mean anything to you?" Harlan's eyes flicked toward the now empty seats where his sergeants had sat. "It's a benevolent association. For officers, widows, and orphans, union dues, community outreach. A benevolent association," Elias repeated, tasting the words like something sour. Director Brooks, using her court-mandated authority as federal receiver, recently subpoenaed the banking records for that fund. He pressed a button on the AV cart. The screen behind the judge lit up with a bank ledger. Rows of highlighted figures glowed. Over recent years, regular weekly deposits were made, almost uniformly $9,000 each time. As a seasoned officer, you know that deposits of $10,000 or more trigger automatic IRS reporting. Depositing just under that threshold to evade monitoring is a federal felony called structuring. Harlan's face glistened with sweat. "I don't handle day-to-day bookkeeping. Sergeant Miller does that. If there was an error, it's a training issue, not a conspiracy. This isn't union dues, Harlan." The voice that cut through the courtroom belonged to Aaliyah Brooks. She had risen from the plaintiff's table, now standing tall in her charcoal suit, holding a stack of financial documents. She stepped forward, taking over the questioning with the grace of a predator moving in for the kill. "I know you don't handle the bookkeeping, Harlan," she said, the use of his first name a deliberate echo of how he had spoken to her in the mud. "Because you offshored the financial management of the Crestwood Fraternity Fund to a private shell LLC registered in Delaware, a company named Crestwood Municipal Paving LLC. Harlan's jaw went slack. The last color drained from his face. "Your Honor," Aaliyah continued, handing a certified document to the bailiff. "That very morning, while Chief Harlan Voss sat at the defense table joking with his attorney, my office, acting in coordination with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, executed a freeze on all assets of the Crestwood Fraternity Fund." The gallery gasped. Reporters' pens scratched in a frantic chorus. "Furthermore," she pressed, eyes locked on Harlan, "the sole proprietor and registered agent of Crestwood Municipal Paving LLC is Arthur Winslow, your wife's brother." "Objection!" Quentin screamed, his chair crashing backward. "This is an ambush. We were not provided these disclosures." "Mr. Hale," Judge Caldwell roared, gavel slamming. "Citing severe and immediate flight risk, the seal was lifted the moment the FBI executed its warrants." Overruled. "Sit down, or the marshals will strap you to that chair." Quentin righted his chair and sank into it, face buried in his hands. He was finished. Aaliyah took several steps closer to the witness box, now standing exactly where Harlan had once stood, shining his maglite into her eyes. The power had inverted completely. "Let me tell you what happened that morning, Harlan," she said, voice low and intense. "When the FBI knocked on Arthur Winslow's door, He did not ask for a lawyer. He asked for a deal. He handed over hard drives containing the shadow ledgers of your entire operation. The millions you seized from innocent out-of-state drivers on Route 9 did not merely buy luxury SUVs. They were funneled through your brother-in-law's fake paving company, washed clean, and used to illegally fund the re-election campaigns of Mayor Victor Langford and City Manager Lionel Graves. Harlan began to hyperventilate, hands shaking so violently they rattled the microphone stand. His town, his mayor, his family, his money, everything he had built over years was being vaporized before his eyes by the woman he had called a nobody. Right now, Aaliyah continued, FBI agents are walking Mayor Victor Langford out of City Hall in handcuffs. You did not merely run a corrupt police department, Harlan. You operated a localized criminal syndicate under color of law. Harlan stared at her, eyes wide with terror that bordered on madness. He remembered the rain, the mud, kicking her shoes into the puddle, laughing at her silence. He realized now that silence had not been fear. It had been the cold observation of someone designing his personal guillotine. "You!" he choked. "You set me up! You came down here just to destroy me!" "No, Harlan," she said, voice empty of pity. "You destroyed yourself. I simply gave you the rope, and you tied the noose. When you stood on that highway and targeted me, you relied on a broken system that lets you prey on the vulnerable. You thought you were the apex predator of Crestwood. You did not realize that in the eyes of the United States Department of Justice, you are nothing but a localized infection. And I am the cure." She nodded to Elias Grant, who stepped back to the podium. "Chief Harlan Voss," Elias asked with finality, "do you intend to invoke your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination regarding your role in laundering millions in stolen civilian assets through a shell corporation controlled by your family?" Harlan looked at Judge Caldwell. He looked at Quentin, who would not meet his eyes. He looked at the gallery where reporters stared with the hunger of wolves scenting blood. Finally, he looked at Aaliyah Brooks, immaculate, untouchable, the embodiment of the justice he had mocked. He slumped forward, defeated and broken. I plead the Fifth," he whispered. The words hung in the air like smoke from an executioner's rifle, a pathetic surrender from a man who had spent years demanding absolute submission from everyone who crossed his path. Chief Harlan Voss sat slumped in the witness box, a hollowed-out shell of the tyrant who had swaggered into the building only hours earlier. Sweat ran in cold rivulets down his neck. His breath came in shallow gasps. He looked utterly destroyed. Judge Everett Caldwell removed his spectacles with deliberate precision and leaned forward. "Chief Harlan Voss, you may step down. You will stand before this bench." Harlan's legs trembled so violently he had to grip the railing to rise. He stumbled forward, looking years older. Broad shoulders caved inward. He stood before the bench, a local warlord finally forced to bow before the sovereign law of the land. At the defense table, Quentin Hale snapped his briefcase shut, stood, and took 2 deliberate steps away, physically and legally distancing himself from the disaster. He did not look at his former client. "Harlan Voss," Judge Caldwell began, voice resonating through the silent courtroom. "In my long career on the federal bench, I have presided over organized crime syndicates, violent cartels, and sophisticated white-collar frauds. Yet I have rarely seen such flagrant, arrogant, and systemic abuse of power as the one presented here today." He held up the thick folder of audits and affidavits. "You took a sacred oath to protect the citizens of Crestwood. You were entrusted with the power of the state, the right to deprive people of liberty, to carry a weapon in the name of the law, to serve as a shield for the vulnerable. Instead, you turned your police department into a taxpayer-funded extortion racket. You hunted out-of-state drivers like game. You targeted minorities and those you deemed nobodies because you calculated they lacked the resources to fight back. You weaponized the badge to enrich your family and your corrupt political allies. Judge Caldwell turned his gaze to the plaintiff's table where Aaliyah Brooks stood. Posture perfect. Expression unreadable. The United States Department of Justice, through Director Brooks as Special Inspector General, has filed an emergency motion seeking to formalize the absolute federal receivership of the Crestwood Police Department and demanding the immediate, permanent termination of your employment pending criminal prosecution. Harlan let out a stifled sob. The sound of a man watching his identity fed into a wood chipper. "Motion granted," Judge Caldwell declared. "Effective this second, Harlan Voss. You are stripped of your rank, your title, your law enforcement certification, your municipal pension, and your right to ever wear a badge in the United States of America again." Reporters' keyboards clattered like locusts until the judge raised a hand and silence fell. "However, Mr. Voss, we are far from finished," Judge Caldwell continued. "Due to your brazen intimidation of a federal witness in this courtroom and the undeniable flight risk posed by the severity of the financial crimes uncovered in the preceding hours, the situation has changed. While you sat at the defense table this morning, laughing at the woman you believed was a helpless civilian, a federal grand jury returned a sealed multi-count indictment against you, Mayor Victor Langford, and City Manager Lionel Graves. The charges include wire fraud, money laundering, extortion under color of official right, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Harlan opened his mouth, but no sound came. "Given the evidence," Judge Caldwell concluded, voice cold, "I am revoking your bail. You will not be going home today. You are remanded into federal custody." He nodded to the marshals. "Secure the prisoner." 2 federal marshals stepped forward. "Hands behind your back, Mr. Voss." Harlan did not resist. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs closing around his wrists echoed through the courtroom, the sound of iron gates slamming shut. "Walk," the marshal ordered. They marched him down the center aisle. To reach the doors, he had to pass directly in front of Aaliyah Brooks, the woman he had left shivering in the mud, the woman whose shoes he had kicked into a puddle, the woman he had called a nobody. As he was paraded past her, Harlan's bravado finally shattered. Tears cut tracks through the sweat on his cheeks. He looked at her, desperate to see anger, something that would mean this was personal, petty. But Aaliyah Brooks was not smiling. There was no gloating, only the cold, clinical satisfaction of a necessary job completed. She looked at him not as a rival, but as a dangerous obstacle finally removed from the road. "Director Brooks," he whispered, voice a broken rasp. "Please, I didn't know who you were." Aaliyah met his gaze. She remembered the mud seeping through her socks, the blinding maglight, the arrogance in his voice when he told her she was a nobody. "That was your fatal mistake, Harlan," she said quietly, words reaching only him and the marshals. "You should not have to know who someone is to treat them with basic human dignity." She held his eyes for one final, devastating second. "Pick up your trash, Mr. Voss," she echoed, returning his own humiliating words with the full weight of federal justice behind them. "And get out of my sight." Harlan let out a choked gasp as the marshals shoved him forward, marching him past flashing cameras and out through the heavy double doors. The doors swung shut with a final, resounding thud. Inside the courtroom, Aaliyah Brooks slowly exhaled. She turned from the doors and began methodically packing the financial ledgers into her briefcase. Elias Grant walked over and extended a hand. She shook it firmly. "Good work, Director. The easy part is over, Elias," she replied, snapping the briefcase shut. "The corruption in Crestwood ran deep. We have an entire department to rebuild, policies to rewrite, and a shattered community's trust to earn back. The real work starts now." Yet as she stepped out of the federal courthouse into the bright morning sun, surrounded by the clamor of the press, she allowed herself one small, fleeting moment of satisfaction. The apex predator had been caged. The fiefdom had been dismantled, and the town of Crestwood finally belonged to the law once again. While this narrative is a dramatized exploration of power and hubris, its legal and structural mechanics are grounded in documented realities. The United States Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division routinely employs federal law to investigate municipal police departments for patterns and practices of constitutional violations. Real-world federal consent decrees, such as those implemented in Ferguson, Missouri, and Baltimore, Maryland, have placed local precincts under aggressive federal oversight when systemic corruption took hold. The abuse of civil asset forfeiture, racially motivated traffic stops, and the harassment of marginalized communities are not fiction. They are historical realities that have ruined innocent lives. This story stands as a reminder that unchecked power eventually meets its limit, and that true justice requires a legal system willing to hold the powerful accountable to the very laws they swore to uphold.